Hi, Governor Jay Inslee here, and I'd like to welcome you all to this year's Affordable Housing Conference. Over the last legislative session, our state made significant progress in addressing affordable housing and homelessness. We've allocated $1.4 billion to address housing needs. We've increased funding for the Housing and Essential Needs Program. We've allocated $350 million to build and preserve affordable homes. And we've secured a permanent funding source for rental assistance. We've created a first-in-the-nation right to counsel for low-income tenants in eviction court. These are historic policies and investments, but we all know there is more we have to do. So I am thankful for the dedication of people and organizations like you all here today. I know that together we can make more progress on housing and homelessness. You'll hear from some truly remarkable speakers who have led national efforts in this arena, including the current HUD Secretary Adrianne Todman, former HUD Secretary Julian Castro, author and activist Adrianne Kendi, and other incredible local leaders. I'd also like to thank our Department of Commerce, who's done yeoman's work in overseeing the Housing Trust Fund and other programs. The Housing Finance Commission has also put their shoulder to the wheel, allocating federal resources for building and preserving affordable housing and facilitating a home loan program that helps thousands of people become homeowners every year. And they're doing that with a focus on serving communities of color that have been left behind. I know this year's conference will be successful, and I look forward to working with you all to turn the fruits of this labor into new policies to better serve Washingtonians. Our homelessness problem is unacceptable in any community in the state of Washington. And in the upcoming legislative session, I look forward to working with you to take the next steps forward. We've got to be aggressive in this regard. I'm going to look forward to being shoulder to shoulder with you when legislators get back here in January. Thanks a million. Good luck. Be well.
Great. Thank you, Governor Inslee, for your hard work and for your support of affordable housing in our state. I now have the honor of introducing our first keynote speaker, Deputy Secretary of U.S. Housing and Urban Development, Adrianne Todman. No organization on Capitol Hill represents the need for affordable housing more than HUD. Deputy Todman, along with Secretary Marcia Fudge, are leading the way to more Americans achieving the dream of housing. Deputy Secretary Todman has a tenured career in the housing industry, having served with the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials, the District of Columbia Housing Authority, and several positions with HUD. She believes, as we do, that we have a responsibility to confront housing insecurity and help ensure access to good homes, to eliminate all forms of discrimination, and to build on our nation's housing infrastructure in a way that expands equitable access to housing for all people. Now, please welcome Deputy Secretary Adrianne Todman to Housing Washington.
Hello, everyone, and good morning to you. I hope everybody can hear and see me okay. Wonderful, excellent, good. So thank you so much, Director Walker, for that kind introduction. It looks like my screen went out there a little bit, so let me know if that seems to be problematic. And I'd like to thank the entire leadership team of the Washington State Housing Finance Commission, the Washington State Department of Commerce, and of course, the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance. And thank you again, Directors Walker, Brown, and Myers. I know that this is going to be a fabulous session because my friends Emily and Diane will be joining you or have joined you already. And you will be hearing from our wonderful former HUD Secretary, Leon Castro. So it looks like there's lots of good housing talk and inspiration ahead. And I'd like to thank all of you for participating or tuning in. And many of you are fighting so tirelessly to not just finance and build housing, but to help break down barriers to affordable housing and to secure equity throughout our housing system. Let me just say that this is a historic moment for housers, whether you are in Washington State or in Washington, DC. And I'm excited to be a part of it as your Deputy Secretary. In fact, I was thinking just before I jumped on here that I am sitting in the very office that your own Ron Sims once sat when he was Deputy Secretary of HUD some years ago. So that's wonderful to know and wonderful inspiration as well. He is a great model of a Deputy Secretary. It's hard to describe the breadth and the width of the ongoing discourse right now in Washington, DC, when it comes to housing issues. And not one day goes by where the Secretary and I are not engaging in very deep and meaningful conversation with the White House, our colleagues at Treasury, our friends at USDA about the importance of affordable housing and community development, but also just how do we get it done? How do we achieve the outcomes that I know so many of you are hoping that we do here inside the Beltway. And quite frankly, that is why it's so important that we are fighting for the president's agenda to build back better. This agenda will dramatically expand our supply of affordable housing for most vulnerable Americans. It will help millions of households to pay rent and to buy their first homes. And it will also help to revitalize our nation's public housing, which is near and dear to my heart as somebody who once ran the DC Housing Authority. The president's agenda will strengthen incentives for developers to build more affordable housing through LIHTC, which I know is near and dear to your heart there, Director Walker. And it will also contain major investments in HUD programs that produce and preserve affordable housing. They include the Housing Trust Fund, our home program, and also an expansion in our project-based rental assistance. Many of these programs have not seen significant increases in years. And I've been in this industry for just over 30 years, and I know what we're talking about these days is just phenomenal and awe-inspiring. That lack of investment is something that our president wants to change, and that's why he wants to reverse years of neglect in our communities, particularly communities that have been left behind and communities of people of color. His agenda will use housing as a platform to advance things that are important to him, equity and justice. And it will help reverse the long legacy of injustices throughout our housing ecosystem. This administration wants to reduce exclusionary zoning policies. These local regulations, quite frankly, drive up the cost of producing affordable housing, and they prevent too many people from moving into neighborhoods with good schools, good jobs, greener streets, and cleaner air. In addition, the Build Back Better agenda will help America take major strides in advancing environmental justice. Look, we know that Americans of color are disproportionately threatened by climate change and extreme weather. We are more likely to live in low-lying areas at greater risk of catastrophic flooding. And we are more likely to live in communities that lack parks, gardens, and other green space which help absorb surge storming waters. The president knows that we cannot afford to wait. We must act now. And that's why these substantial investments to increase climate resiliency are so key. Just the other day, I was reading that we have communities amongst us who are not able to catch enough fish and salmon, so they're able to store them during the winter. I've witnessed from this side of the country some of the historic wildfires that have burned tragically in your state. And we know that many of you are suffering through a historic drought. We have to act. We certainly have to act, and we need to start now. You know, if there's anything that laid bare the inequities throughout our society, it was the pandemic. And during the crisis, I know you all saw that low-income families, the working class, and Black and Brown families were the ones most likely to fall ill from virus, to lose their job, or to suffer a loss in wages, or to fall behind in their bills and their housing payments. And that is why what the president and the vice president and our secretary are fighting for today is so very critical. It's why infrastructure is critical. It's why we also need to make sure we are getting our rent relief out the door. We cannot turn away from what the pandemic has exposed. And what we've learned are lessons that so many of you who have been in the housing arena already know, that housing is healthcare and housing is what matters. This administration will center our work on doing the right thing, in delivering relief to communities who have fallen behind because of the pandemic, in breaking down unjust barriers that limit the future of far too many, in calling for bold new actions to help forge a fairer and more just America. On his first day in office, our president signed an executive order directing our federal government to explore solutions in advancing equity. And since then, HUD has worked with determination to meet the president's mandate. This includes our efforts to help correct injustices. Let me tell a little bit about how we're doing that. So many of us are aware that homeownership is one way to build intergenerational wealth. Yet too many families have failed to experience the same benefits of homeownership as other families. Bias in the appraisal market represents a major part of that problem. The value of a home and the rate at which that value grows should never, ever be determined by your skin color of the person who lives there. Yet studies have found that homes that are in largely white neighborhoods are appraised at 25% higher than homes that are in predominantly Black neighborhoods. Now, this is a reality that we cannot accept. It's a reality that the president refuses to accept. And that is why he has charged our Secretary Marcia Fudge and Ambassador Susan Rice to co-chair a task force that is centered around removing and turning around those injustices. This new task force, the Property Appraisal and Valuation Equity Task Force, or PAVE for short, is the first of its kind. And I am thrilled that our secretary has played a leadership role. The task force is doing its due diligence now and exploring different topics, and will be putting out a report, I believe, during the first quarter of next year on some of its findings and how it plans to move forward. In recent years, America's homeownership between Black and white families have reached its widest point in 1968, when banks could still legally discriminate against borrowers based on the color of their skin. This is something we must change. Another big reason behind the widening gap is the burden of student debt carried by millions of Americans. You know, HUD is determined to help more Americans with student loans to realize their dream of homeownership. And that is why earlier this year, we issued a new policy that makes it easier for borrowers with student debt to qualify for a federally guaranteed mortgage. We are also, as many of you know, working on our Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Rule. Some of you may recall that earlier this year, we right-sized the definition of AFFH, and we've put fair housing back into AFFH. And we know that many local leaders like you are watching keenly as HUD does its work to modernize AFFH and make sure that it's not just working in communities, but it's also working to do the right thing and to create opportunities for so many people who were left behind. Let me say that all of HUD's work revolves around advancing the fundamental belief that every person needs an affordable and secure home. And I know many of you believe that right along with us. And that's why I'm pleased that HUD continues to provide resources that enable communities to increase housing stability. And that includes awards to folks like you and your state. We've awarded nearly $16 million to Washington State as part of our historic allocation in the National Housing Trust Fund. We have also provided 42 million in affordable housing funds for tribes that are in Washington. We've also allocated $93 million in CDBG funds that will help with the community amenities and affordable housing goals and the infrastructure needs that you all have in the state of Washington. But we know that's not enough. I know that's not enough. Being a practitioner like many of you, I know that's just not enough. The secretary knows it's not enough. And that's why we are fighting every single day for American families by getting the infrastructure and Build Back Better agenda through Congress. And we know that you will join that fight with us. You know, COVID-19 taught us many things, and I mentioned it earlier, it taught us that home and housing is healthcare. Back last March, and for some of you in Washington, perhaps even before March, we were told to stay at home so we could be safe. And if you think back then about how important for all of us who had a home to stay home, but think about the 500,000 Americans across the country who had no home to go to at all. These are our homeless neighbors who were housed eventually through hotels and motels and through some other shelter systems. But certainly it was difficult for them to really be resilient against a public health moment. Homelessness has no place in this administration's vision for America. And that is why HUD recently announced 2 weeks ago a major initiative to address the homelessness crisis. We call this initiative House America, and it brings together leaders from across the federal government and communities in every corner of our country to forge a historic new partnership. Our initiative will empower states, localities, and tribal leaders to put our nation on a path to address homelessness using the unprecedented investments as part of the American Rescue Plan. The Rescue Plan promised 70,000 emergency housing vouchers to support this initiative and $5 billion to create affordable housing for people experiencing homelessness through the HOME program. Of those totals, more than 98 million for unit creation was forwarded to Washington State, and another 2,400 emergency housing vouchers were awarded through the Rescue Plan. We are proud to be able to provide those resources to your beautiful area. And I know that you're going to put those resources to work. You know, I was proud just a couple of weeks ago to join the kickoff of House America with many wonderful leaders from across the country, and those leaders span the entire country here. We've got the state of California was on there, the state of Maine. We had leaders from Charlotte all the way to the Cherokee Nation, and we had leaders from Washington D.C. right there to Seattle, Washington. Together, these leaders have committed to accomplishing 2 goals by the end of next year. First is to provide at least 100,000 Americans with permanent housing. And the second is to commit to building at least 20,000 new homes for people who are experiencing homelessness. Look, the Biden-Harris administration is doing everything we can to help forge a stronger and more equitable America. But we cannot accomplish our mission alone. We just can't. We need the help of local leaders, planners, practitioners, funders, bankers, like all of you here, to really help fulfill the president's vision for this country. From championing Build Back America, to advancing equity, to building our affordable housing, preserving our affordable housing. We know that we can count on your support. HUD stands proud as your partner. And I just personally want to thank you for all the work that you do. Steve pointed out the shovels that are sitting right over my right shoulder here. And, I mentioned to him that this is not just a product of the creation of new affordable housing in years past, but will certainly serve as an inspiration for all of us on all the affordable housing we have to build moving forward. I want to thank you all for all of the amazing, amazing work that you do. And I look forward to being out there in Washington. I haven't been in Washington probably in about 2 years, but I look forward to coming out and witnessing the work that you are taking on. Thank you all so much, and good luck.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary. I think, first of all, we look forward to welcoming you to the other Washington and revisiting the Pacific Northwest, and would love to show you some of the great work that's happening out here, as well as introduce you to a great set of partners in the cause. I think we have time for questions, and if people want to maybe drop some questions in the chat, I can try to facilitate a little back and forth, but maybe I could start with a few questions. And boy, you packed a lot into your comments, and I really appreciate that. It's great to have some time with you today, and the access that you have, and the perspective that you're exposed to, and the seat that you sit in. You mentioned, the power of the Build Back Better conversation, and one of the things that is sort of the mounting anxiety is, as we hear about sort of the discussions that are happening in Congress, is slowly it starts to sound like, well, my question, let me just start with my question, is how best to advance each issue in recognition of the intersection of each issue. And by each issue, I mean climate and healthcare and housing and equity. And slowly it starts to seem like they start to get siloed again, when we know that there is such a true intersection of all of those issues. And so I'm just curious, since you have not only great access, but also a wealth of experience and understand at the core the intersection of those issues, how do we keep those from becoming siloed in the conversations as the budget process continues and starts to intensify?
Sure, no, thank you for that. And look, the one thing that I know is that elected leaders listen and learn from their constituents. And we sometimes as housers have not necessarily pushed our agenda as hard and as fast as we can. I think that over the past several years, we have seen a sea change in that we are seeing affordable housing and the issues around affordability really come to the forefront of many of our conversations. But I will say, I don't think we have gone far enough. We have not gone far enough. And you all, as the folks who are building and financing families across the state of Washington, you have the perfect examples of the intersection of that housing plays with dealing with issues around equity, dealing with climate change, dealing with creating more resilient communities, dealing with how a home creates the #1 foundation for children to thrive. And so you have it, you already have the solutions. You have the products that you have created that can demonstrate to leaders across the state and to leaders here in Washington, DC, about the critical role that housing plays. It's not talk for you. You actually have the communities. You have examples of homes that are net zero and the important role that they play in creating resiliency, but also in controlling utility costs. I mean, you have those examples that are real, and those are the kind of examples that I think matter the most. For those folks who are not housers, many people who are not housers, it sometimes seems like an esoteric exercise to talk about the connection. But I think that particularly in Washington state, because not only do you have the products, but you are a very thoughtful state. I mean, some of the smartest people in the housing ecosystem live and work right there in Washington, and I'm proud to call them my friends. So I think that the examples that you have, the real life examples that you can share with your elected leaders and share either in Washington state or here, I think that's really critical to telling the story.
Love that. Thank you for addressing that question. You mentioned the sort of at a high level, the big agenda, and among that, the Homeownership Task Force that is acknowledging and sort of further bringing to the forefront the disparities the actions to address, a widening wealth gap, and what home ownership means in terms of building long-lasting intergenerational wealth. Could you say a little bit more about the objectives as you understand them? And I realize I want to acknowledge, as we were talking earlier, you're 3 months on the job. So, could you share anything more on sort of the objectives of that task force and sort of what specifically their charge is?
Sure. Right now we are information gathering. We're doing our due diligence. We are engaging with different parts of the industry to really learn more. And what the goal of the task force is to do a couple of things. One is to have data that is making the issue clear. Clarity is key. And we want to make sure that we have the data to demonstrate to folks across the country sort of what the problem is, what is the issue that we are seeking to address, and ways in which that we can address it. We are also looking to build awareness amongst homeowners so that as you are a new homeowner or a tenured homeowner, you have an understanding of what these the bias and appraisal rates is, the impact it has to your intergenerational wealth building. We are also, I know the team is taking a look at what type of enforcement and compliance tools we have. That might be a little bit trickier, but I know that they are looking into that as well. And this might be something, if you're in the homeownership space, that has been talked about, but it really hasn't been top of mind when we've thought about the building rental homeownership. We have focused a lot in first-time homeowners and
Right.
getting folks into the homeownership arena, but we haven't necessarily looked at the way that the bias and appraisal rates has really impacted Black and Brown families over the course of generations, quite frankly. So we are fully expecting that this work will begin to wrap up in the first quarter of next year. And that, as somebody who's been watching along the sidelines, I mean, I can't wait to see what the product is.
Fantastic. Yeah, like you, we look forward to participating in the discussion and seeing the results in the form of the product and actions that can be implemented to address some of those issues. Almost a similar question. I mean, I'm super excited to hear that AFF is back in action and that the second F is there, and that could you say a little bit more about sort of the sort of resetting of and reframing, or not reframing, but really bringing back energy that was a bit of a void under the last administration around issues of furthering fair housing in a meaningful, action-oriented way.
Right. So the last action that the last administration took on AFFH was really a bridge too far. While we know that affordability is key and building more affordable housing is really important, I think we also need to be keenly aware that AFFH is a part of the Fair Housing Act. Sometimes people think they're two separate actions, but it is part of the Fair Housing Act. So it was really important to this administration to really reintroduce AFFH into the fabric of that act and make it very intentional about when we're talking about affordability, when we're talking about access to communities of opportunity, we're talking about for whom. And so that's one of the things that was kicked off earlier this year, as many of you know. The team here at HUD is working very carefully across offices. This is an all of HUD enterprise right now. That is the level of importance that the secretary and I have placed on making sure that we get it right, and we do as much as we can to really push the envelope to make sure that communities are able to really advance fair housing opportunities. And so they are working very hard across the offices on what that looks like. I don't have a time frame for you right now in terms of when we will be looking to release something, but I do know that we will be holding industry listening sessions. They may have actually begun already, but will be holding industry listening sessions to hear from you about your promise for AFFH, ways that the 2015 rule, you leaned in or had some issues with it. And so we're getting all of that information internally and from folks like you all, and we are going to build out the best darn rule that we can.
Well, maybe one last question. Again, maybe not the fairest of questions, but since we have you here, I find it fascinating that you've only been on the job 3 months, and that you know, acknowledging that you bring so much to the table. How do you manage the next, you know, the first year of being in this new position, and what do you have as your aspirational goals and objectives?
Thank you for that, Steve. So certainly I am a student of housing policy. I love it. I can bask in it all day long. It's good stuff. And that is certainly a huge part of being Deputy Secretary, is working with the Secretary to advance her vision and the goals and the agenda of our President and Vice President. But a big part of this job is also the operational side. That is the job of the Deputy Secretaries across the government, particularly as members of the President's Management Council. So our job is to make sure that our shops are being operated as well as they could. Now, those of you who have a love-hate love relationship with HUD know that we probably have some challenges there. This is my second tour of HUD. I was here in the late 90s, and the HUD I love then is the same HUD I love now. And I think the big difference, though, is when I was last here, HUD had upwards of almost 12,000 employees. And today we stand at about 7,500 employees, and with a portfolio that has grown by billions of dollars. So that math's not working, right? We are a growing portfolio of wonderful things to support, you know, wonderful states like Washington and support the work that they do, but we have a smaller army to do that work. And so one of the things I'm working on is making sure that we are bringing in new talent here at HUD. That we're making sure that our IT system is keeping up with all the work that you're doing and the goals that we have. We're also trying to make sure that we have facilities both here at the Weaver Building in Washington, DC, and really our facilities across the country are keeping up with the spacing needs of our workforce. And we're doing all of that in the scheme of trying to move HUD forward into re-entry in a post-pandemic. So there is a lot of operational things that are going on, and that is a core piece of my portfolio as well. So my goal when I leave here, one of my legacy pieces is, it probably won't be perfect because you take the baton and the next person keeps running, but one of my goals is to do as much as I can to make sure that the business of HUD, the operational side of HUD, is in a secure place, and we are able to support all the program needs that our portfolio brings. That's really, really important to me. And I'll use this as a quick commercial break. You know, we have, notwithstanding whatever happens with reconciliation, we have hundreds of jobs that have been filled over the past year at HUD and will be filled over this coming year or two. You know, it's not a secret to many people that HUD has a very tenured workforce, I'll say. And so we have a fair amount of new jobs, but we have some retirements. So if there are any out there in Washington State who are looking to move to the other Washington, consider this a big old open door welcome to go to USA Jobs and see if there's any opportunities there. I think you all have the exact same talents that we need here at HUD to really push this agenda.
Thank you. As long as housers stay in housing, I'm okay with that. But I want to just thank you again for being so generous with your time and being candid with us, and answering, you know, some of these insider questions. And again, we really look forward to a time when we can welcome you back to the Northwest. and know that, you know, between the secretary and you and the rest of the team, we wish you the best in the next several months as you continue to settle into these new positions. Daunting challenges ahead of us, but know that we're your partners in the other Washington. And again, just want to thank you for your time as our keynote here at Housing Washington. And I'm going to transition now to introduce one of our board members at the Housing Finance Commission, Albert Tripp, who is going to proceed with one of our Friend of Housing Awards. Thank you again, Deputy Secretary.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary Todman, for the inspiring and wonderful conversation. Good morning, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed the morning sessions. I am Albert Tripp. I'm a Housing and Finance Commission board member and city manager for the city of Fairway Heights. I'm pleased to present our second Friend of Housing awardee in the category of housing inclusion. This category honors initiatives that reduce housing barriers for those who have been traditionally marginalized by race, gender, identity, disability, or other reasons. Please join me in congratulating Housing Connector.
It feels really good being in your own space. The last 2 years I was homeless. I think I applied to at least 20 places. Every time you would apply to a place, you get your hopes up. You want to be off the streets and you want to be in your own place. I got my hopes up a lot, and every time I would get them up and I would get denied and it would break me down. I got a phone call from Janae, Catholic Community Services, and she says, Housing Connector. She said, well, we're gonna apply at this place, Hannah, and we're gonna get you in. I'm like, okay, I've heard that so many times before. I ended up getting approved, like, by the grace. I was elated. I was ecstatic. I was so happy, like I could do cartwheels.
Housing Connector is intended to be a tool that will be at the fingertips of every case manager in our community, so that when they have an individual or a family that's searching for a home, they're able to search units that are currently available and that have also waived criteria and barriers for those clients.
As we here at Zillow thought about how we could get involved in our community, housing was a natural choice. We're both building the platform for the Housing Connector, and we're also going to house it here on Zillow.com. To see it actually come to life is really exciting.
At its basic, we're leveraging the platform that Zillow already has in existence for finding homes and making contacts with people that are trying to rent out homes and making that available.
By partnering directly with property owners and managers, we are able to increase access for individuals who are exiting homelessness and also lower the barriers and the screening criteria that often keep them from accessing those homes.
We recognize that we don't have all the answers here at Zillow, but that we have certain skill sets that we can provide and support those who are on the ground doing the amazing work.
There is hope. I'm really grateful for Housing Connector contacting Catholic Community Services about this. The future looks very promising. Jobs lined up, stable home, maybe have kids one day. Yeah, I can see it.
On behalf of our team, our board, and all of our partners, I am thrilled to accept this year's Friends of Housing Award for Housing Inclusion. In our community, there are thousands of individuals who struggle to access housing because of barriers such as a low credit score, a criminal history, or a past eviction. Individuals like Chauncey, who applied to over 20 units, each time getting his hopes up that this could be his breakthrough, simply to be dealt another rejection because of his low credit score. Now, this is unacceptable, but this is also a problem that we can solve. Housing Connector believes that no unit should sit vacant while there are individuals in need of a home. To accomplish this, we partner directly with property owners and managers to reduce barriers and increase access to housing for individuals that are exiting homelessness. What results are win-win outcomes that have allowed us to connect with over 900 properties and house over 2,100 individuals since our launch in Q3 of 2019. We are thrilled to continue our impact as we expand into both Pierce County and Snohomish County, and starting in Q4 of this year, launch operations in Colorado. I am grateful to our partners at Zillow for collaborating with us to design the Housing Connector product that is hosted within Zillow.com, that allows individuals and case managers to expedite the housing search experience and reduce the time an individual is experiencing homelessness. We are excited to continue this work, and we are thankful to the Washington State Housing Finance Commission for this recognition. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And congratulations, Skelcho and Housing Connector and your whole team there. A fantastic example of great innovation in a space where we need all the innovation we can get to make sure people are have an opportunity to have a home. I want to again thank Deputy Secretary Todman for sharing time with us. Fantastic to have her perspective here at Housing Washington. We are going to transition now to breakout sessions again that begin at 11:10, I believe. So we have a little bit of a break for people to recaffeinate and just take a little bit of a break. And we welcome everyone back for the breakout sessions at 11:10. Thank you.